Greetings, Super Horror family and friends. Tonight we're exploring the eerie and unpredictable world of urban exploration, where we will be peeking into the unsettling experiences of 5 brave urban explorers who encountered terror beyond their wildest imaginations. Get ready to shudder in fear as we recount these bone-chilling tales, each one more terrifying than the last. So brace yourselves, turn off the lights, and prepare to be drawn into a realm of the unknown that will keep you up at night. Join me on this journey into the dark and mysterious world of urban exploration, where there's no turning back once you stepped into the unknown. On to our first story. The Room Under the Bridge. A bridge inspector in the San Bernardino area of Southern California was out one afternoon conducting routine checks for lead and asbestos. He was checking under a bridge, and he found what he thought was a small crawl space. He crawled in and was shocked to find a huge, dark, low-ceiling room that continued back below the highway. It was an eerie sight with no source of light, and the sound of water from the nearby canal echoing through the walls. The inspector slowly walked in, shining his flashlight around the room. His heart raced when he saw about 20 people staring back at him from the back of the room. They appeared to be disheveled and stood there still and quiet against the back wall. Weirder still, he remembered seeing a nice rug, multiple large couches, a TV and a table, and a vase with flowers, paintings on the walls, and a floor lamp. But none of it was powered. Freaked out, the inspector quickly ran out of there and told his supervisor. It makes you wonder what other secrets lay hidden beneath the bridges that span across the canals of Southern California. The abandoned East Coast Insane Asylum. There's an abandoned East Coast Insane Asylum that hides underground maze-like tunnels that snake beneath the asylum. A visitor who has been to the complex more than 10 times in the last decade describes the tunnels as roughly 10 to 15 feet underground and long. The subterranean network of tunnels connects each building for steam, water, sewage, and electric, with an emergency escape hatch that leads out to the woods. Most entrances to the tunnel system are hidden in walls, making them difficult to find. He discovered one entrance in the complex's post office, a place he'd been many times before, without noticing it. The complex has been abandoned for 20 to 30 years, causing parts of the tunnels to be wet from leaking water. The underground tunnels are completely devoid of any outside sources of light, making the darkness oppressive as it seems to absorb any light that it gets. A very strong, bright flashlight is required to navigate through the tunnels. Without one, it's a challenge to make out the features of things in the distance. Even with the right kind of flashlight, sometimes the only information you would get is a slight tonal difference to determine when something was off in the distance. On one of his solo visits, this man went to what used to be a water treatment building for the complex. At the end of the tunnel, he described a large room with 2 15-foot tall water storage tanks. Inside of them, there was around an inch of water and a lot of muck. He heard a sound coming from the opposite side of the room, maybe 20 feet away. It was a sound. His own shoes were making the same sound from being stuck in the mud. There was someone else in the underground room with him. He shined his flashlight across the room, but he couldn't see anything. But he kept hearing the wet footsteps. Suddenly, he saw a human-shaped figure that was just black, like a shadow against a peach-colored concrete wall. He stammered out a, "Hello?" and saw the person's 2 eyes flash up. Their eyes were reflecting back off the flashlight, and that was all he could see. He couldn't make out any distinguishing characteristics. Not knowing if it was a person or some kind of creature lurking in the darkness, he bolted, flying up the inclined tunnel, slipping and sliding all over the damp concrete. He fell a handful of times, sprained his wrist badly, and got a number of cuts on his one knee. He says that the run through the underground tunnels felt like an eternity. He describes it as the closest thing he'd ever experienced to a living nightmare. He'd never been so terrified in all of his life. He advises visitors to not go alone, as accidents can happen, leaving one alone, trapped, underground, in the dark. The Ulster Castle. A group of urban explorers stumbled upon a horrifying scene while exploring an abandoned property in Medonte, Ontario. The explorers had traveled an hour to explore the property called Stone Castle by some and Ulster Castle by others. When they arrived, they found that all the buildings on the property were still intact, except for the main house, which had been destroyed by a fire. However, the group was not deterred, and they proceeded to explore the other buildings on the property. They did travel an hour after all. The first building they explored was a barn, and it was there that things immediately took a chilling turn. In the basement of the barn, they discovered evidence of satanic rituals. There were satanic symbols on the walls, an altar with black candles, and even a knife with what appeared to be blood on it. But the most disturbing discovery was the makeshift cage and chains, suggesting that the group who had used the barn for these rituals may have been involved in more sinister activities. Despite the alarming discovery, the group pressed on and explored the other buildings of the property. Their next discovery was even more shocking. In the stables at the back of the property, they were hit with a powerful stench of rotting flesh. Inside, they found the remains of numerous animals that had been mutilated in a horrific manner. By this point, the group was understandably shaken, but they had one more building they wanted to explore, the carriage house. However, their nerves were so frayed that one member of the group refused to go inside, so the rest of the group split up, with some heading to the main house and others going to the carriage house. As it turned out, the group that went to the carriage house were the lucky ones. There was nothing of interest inside, and they quickly went to rejoin their friends at the main house. But at the main house, things were different. The group was confronted by another group of people who had been lying in wait for them. The group, which consisted of adults, teenagers, and children, were armed with weapons ranging from golf clubs to baseball bats. The urban explorers quickly realized that they were in serious danger, and they tried to flee. But the other group blocked their escape and demanded to know why they were on the property. It was a terrifying moment for the group, and they feared for their lives. Fortunately, they were eventually allowed to leave, unharmed, but the incident left them traumatized and deeply shaken. The Mundet Court Factory. Once the pride of Portugal's cork industry, the Mundet Cork Factory has become an abandoned, decrepit shadow of its former glory. While it once employed a significant number of workers, it's now become a haven for thrill-seekers and urban explorers looking to uncover its dark secrets. The factory opened its doors in 1905 and quickly established itself as the largest cork factory in Portugal. Its founder, Mundet & Sons, was a beacon of the times, providing employment opportunities for many women who helped fuel the cork industry's growth. However, the work conditions eventually started to decline, and accidents became more and more common. People lost fingers and limbs due to unsafe cork cutting practices, and many even lost their lives to the razor-sharp blades that were ubiquitous in the factory. In the 1950s, a medical center was built near the factory to help those in need, and work conditions improved as a result. But tragedy struck the factory again in 1986, when the factory's owner, Paula Mundet, known as the Cork Queen, was brutally murdered by her lover, who mutilated her body beyond recognition. The gruesome murder, combined with the decline of the cork industry, ultimately led to the factory's closure in 1988. In the 1990s, the factory was heavily guarded by armed security guards who began to speak of strange occurrences in the factory's vault area. They claimed to have seen a werewolf lurking around the premises, adding to the factory's already chilling reputation. By the 2000s, the night shift positions were abandoned, and the only way to capture nocturnal events was through video cameras. This gave urban explorers ample opportunity to sneak in and explore the abandoned factory's premises. However, their investigations revealed a dark and malevolent presence lurking within the factory's walls. One young man and his friends were exploring the factory. They found valuable items, including money and guns. Then one of them found a disturbing photo of a distorted girl's face. They continued to explore the factory, capturing eerie mist and colorful orbs on camera, as well as hearing the rattle of the long-abandoned machinery. Then, they saw someone staring at them from a window. Terrified, they ran outside. Once they got out, They looked up to see that the window didn't have access to it by a balcony or other means. Anyone seen there had to be floating. On another occasion, they saw two giant orbs floating above them, causing their infrared sensors to shut down. In the factory's red zone, where the worst events took place, they found papers from the 1980s. They could hear machines rustling and roofs collapsing in complete darkness. Now the factory is being demolished, but its dark legacy will linger on, haunting those who have lost loved ones and limbs to it, as well as those who have dared to enter its premises after its closing. Bodies in the sewer pipes. A group of friends, John, Mike, and Q, shared a love of exploration. They often went on daring escapades, exploring sewer pipes and abandoned buildings. One day, while hiking in the woods, they stumbled upon a pipe sticking out of a hillside. The pipe was almost hidden by the trees, and it piqued their curiosity. The group agreed to explore the pipe, and they crawled through the cramped, dark tunnel on their hands and knees. They crawled for around 600 feet when they reached a large manhole room. The room was dark and damp, and the musty smell was overwhelming. As they looked around the room, they noticed 3 smaller pipes leading off in different directions. They chose one and decided to explore it further. The pipe was so narrow that they had to crawl on their stomachs. The only light source available came from the faint glow of their headlamps. As they crawled deeper, the pipe became smaller, and the wall seemed to close in on them. It was claustrophobic, and they had to take deep breaths to remain calm. Suddenly, Q let out a cry of disgust. They'd come across a dark lump that blocked their path. It was a disgusting mess of fur and waste, and who knows what. The group hesitated, unsure of what to do, but eventually, they convinced Q to climb over it. As they continued their crawl, the stench grew stronger, and they all began to feel nauseous. Their heads throbbed, and their eyes watered from the disgusting stench. Eventually, they reached a point where the pipe opened up into a larger space. They could feel a breeze on their face. Suddenly, Mike's voice broke the silence. "Guys, something's not right here," he said, his voice trembling. "There's a horrible stench ahead, and it's making me feel sick." The group hesitated, unsure of what to do, but their curiosity got the better of them. They crawled a little further and saw what looked like a body. Felt like a body, but it was not human or even animal, just alien. It was lying motionless, face down, and covered in filth. They realized that they had gone too far and decided to retreat back to the manhole room. When they emerged from the pipe, they were covered in a thick, smelly substance that looked like fur. They quickly realized it was from the dark lump they had to crawl over earlier. They were shaken and disoriented, but they knew they had to get out of there as quickly as possible. As they hiked back to their cars, the group was silent. They knew they had taken a risk, and they were lucky to have escaped unharmed. They made a pact to never go back again, but the memory of that day will stay with them forever. As we've reached the end of our terrifying journey, I hope you've enjoyed this creepy experience. If you're brave enough to face more terrifying tales, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments which encounter was the scariest, and if you've ever encountered something terrifying in an abandoned place. Till next time, I hope you sleep well and take good care of yourselves. But remember, on this channel, sweet dreams are not guaranteed. Good night.